I remember the first night I walked into those woods. The moon hung pale and distant, barely piercing the thick fog that pressed against the twisted branches. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, carrying a weight that made my chest tight. Every sound, the soft rustle of leaves, the crack of a distant branch, the whisper of the wind, felt exaggerated, alive. My flashlight flickered once, twice, casting shadows that bent unnaturally across the trunks. Then I heard it, a voice, soft and low, calling my name, though I was utterly alone. It wasn't angry or kind. It was patient, deliberate, waiting. My breath caught, my steps slowed, and the fog seemed to thicken around me. That's when I saw it. It started with a trail. A thin line of dirt, barely wide enough for one person. The kind that disappears when you stop looking at it. The air was cold that night. Not sharp, just heavy, like the trees were holding their breath. Fog drifted low, coiling around my ankles. Every step felt quieter than the last. Even the crickets had gone still. I told myself it was just a walk, just the woods behind the old field. But the air had changed. It carried something faint, something that didn't belong to the wind. A whisper, soft, close enough to stir the hair near my ear. I turned. Nothing. Only trees, leaning inward like they wanted to listen. I kept walking. The trail wound deeper, curling through black trunks and pale mist. Somewhere behind me, leaves rustled, slow, careful, almost human. I stopped breathing to listen. Silence. Then another whisper, lower this time, stretched out like a sigh. I couldn't make out the words, only the shape of them. A murmur that felt like my name. The fog thickened. It gathered around the roots, rising and folding. And for a second, I thought I saw it move with intent, like something crawling beneath the earth. I glanced up. The moon was just a blur behind the trees, a pale coin pressed into a cloudy sky. And the trail, it seemed longer now, as if each step stretched it further away from where I'd started. The whisper came again. This time, it wasn't behind me. It was ahead, waiting. I should have turned back. But the forest didn't feel like it would let me. Branches arched over the path, closing in, their tips almost brushing my shoulders as I passed. There was a hum in the air, faint, trembling, not from insects or wind. It felt deeper, like the ground itself was breathing. I touched one of the trunks beside me. The bark was damp, pulsing faintly beneath my fingers. And then, beneath that heartbeat, I heard it, a voice buried inside the wood. It wasn't speaking words, just breathing, matching mine. When I stepped back, the whisper followed. It slipped between the leaves, soft and slow, like fabric dragging across the dirt. I walked faster. The whispers did too. Each footstep echoed, muffled by fog and fear, until I couldn't tell which sound were mine anymore. The trees grew thinner. The trail opened slightly, and there, just ahead, was a clearing, a patch of moonlight spilling onto the ground. I could see movement at the edge of it, not clear enough to name, only the shift of something tall, something that didn't quite fit the shape of a person. The whispering stopped. The hum stopped. Even the fog froze, suspended in the air, like breath held between two heartbeats. I stood there, watching the space where the thing had been. The silence pressed into me, thick, almost wet, like the whole forest was waiting for something to start again. When I finally stepped forward, my shoe brushed against something cold. A smooth stone, half buried in the dirt. Carved into its surface were shallow lines, spirals like roots or veins. And faintly, under the dirt, a whisper rose again. This time, clear enough to understand. Not my name, not a warning, just one word. Stay. I dropped the stone. It rolled toward the fog and disappeared. The trail behind me had gone dark, completely gone. Only the whisper remained, circling low to the ground, filling the space where my footsteps had been. I tried to move, but the forest held still. The hum began again, softer now, like it was coming from inside my chest. And I realized the trail wasn't leading anywhere. It had been waiting for me. So I stood there in the pale light, breathing with the trees, until the fog rose high enough to hide everything else. It was near the marsh road again, just after dusk. The air felt damp, heavy, Mist slid across the ground like it was alive, brushing against my shoes, curling around the fence posts. Each breath came out pale, each step swallowed by the fog. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd seen it before. That faint light, a lantern, drifting through the mist, always just far enough that I couldn't see who carried it. Tonight, I wanted to know. The reeds whispered. Something small darted away. Maybe a bird, maybe not. Even the crickets were quiet. I stopped when I saw it again. A soft yellow glow, suspended above the ground. It moved slowly, swaying, like it was carried by someone walking through water. But the water was still. No ripples. No footsteps. Just light. I called out. Once. My voice cracked in the fog and didn't come back. The lantern paused. A faint shimmer of glass, the faintest reflection. Then it began to move again, closer this time. Not fast, not threatening, almost gentle. The air grew colder. Each inhale stung. I could smell iron, wet earth, and something faintly sweet. When I stepped forward, the mist thickened, folding on itself, and the world behind me disappeared. Only white around me now. And the lantern, it flickered, tilted, as if it was watching me. I should have turned back. But curiosity feels like a hook when you're alone. I reached out, fingers trembling, and the light dimmed. The fog seemed to hold its breath. I saw movement behind the glass. Not a flame, a shape. Something inside was moving, like a hand pressing from within the glow, stretching, twisting. The metal handle creaked. I could hear it, slow, strain, like rust cracking apart. Then I realized it wasn't hanging from anything. The lantern floated. Just there, between us, the glass clouded over, pale and wet. And in the reflection, I thought I saw a face. Not mine. Eyes wide, hollow. Mouth open like it was still trying to breathe. The light pulsed once. Then again. With each pulse, the mist moved, circling me, spiraling tighter. The reeds bent away from it, whispering in one direction, like they were avoiding whatever stood beside me. I turned. Nothing, only the cold pressing against my neck. When I looked back, the lantern was closer, too close. I could feel the warmth against my skin, a heartbeat inside the glass. I whispered barely, "Who's there?" The fog answered, a low, drawn-out breath that didn't belong to me, like the marsh itself was exhaling. Then silence. The lantern tilted again, a slow nod, and began to move backward into the mist, not floating away, but drawing me with it. I followed without thinking, every step softer, quieter, until I realized my feet weren't touching the ground. The air felt thick, like wading through invisible water. I reached out again, and this time I touched the glass that was cold. So cold my fingertips burned. Inside, I saw shapes, dozens of them, faces, each one faint, pressed against a glow, their eyes glimmering through the fog. Their mouths moved slowly. No sound, only the soft that filled the air around me, a vibration deep in my bones that I stumbled back. My breath caught, and for a moment I thought I heard my name, whispered from inside the lantern. I froze. The mist shifted, like someone had brushed past me. Something unseen, something patient, waiting. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light dimmed. The glow shrank into a pin of gold, and went out. Darkness folded over everything. The silence rang in my ears. I stood there, gripping the cold air where it had been. Nothing but fog, endless and pale. Somewhere in the distance, a single drip of water fell into the marsh. Then another, a slow rhythm, steady as breath. I turned back toward the road, but I couldn't see it anymore. The mist had erased the path. Only a faint warmth lingered against my palm, like the glass had left its imprint there. I walked until I saw the fence post again. The world started to return, colorless but real. And behind me, deep in the mist, a light flickered once, like a heartbeat. Then it vanished. It was early evening when I found the tree. The air had that cold, wet stillness that only comes before rain. Every branch in the forest leaned toward it, like they were listening. The tree stood alone in a clearing. Its bark was pale, almost silver, like bone under thin skin. And at its center, a hollow, wide enough for someone to crawl through. The wind moved softly through the grass. It carried something faint, not words exactly, just a murmur, like a thought, that didn't belong to me. I stepped closer. The ground was soft, layered with rotting leaves. They clung to my shoes like old skin. Every step felt too loud. I could feel the forest watching. Every branch seemed to hold its breath. Even the insects had gone quiet. When I reached the base of the tree, I saw that the bark was carved. Not initials, not symbols, but faces. Dozens of them. Their mouths open. Their eyes shut tight. I touched one. The wood was warm. For a second, I thought it pulsed beneath my fingers. A heartbeat, faint and far away. Then the murmur came again. Closer now, inside the hollow. It wasn't a whisper exactly, more like breathing. Soft, slow, uneven. The air inside smelled of soil and something sweet, like decay mixed with flowers. I leaned closer, letting my eyes adjust. The hollow went deep, far deeper than it should have. It was as if the tree had swallowed the light. Something flickered within. Not movement, more like a reflection. A pale shimmer, as if the inside of the trunk were wet. I should have stepped back, but my hand moved forward instead. The air grew colder the closer I got. The murmurs tangled into words I couldn't understand, like prayers said backward. I whispered, "Hello?" The sound vanished before it left my mouth. Swallowed, like the hollow didn't want to share it. For a moment, I thought I saw my own reflection in the darkness. Then it blinked. I stumbled back, catching my foot on a root. The forest exhaled, every leaf trembling. When I looked again, the hollow was empty, completely black, silent. But the carvings, the faces on the bark, their mouths were closed now. The air pressed heavier against me, thick and damp. I could hear something inside the trunk, faint but steady, a slow tapping like fingers on wood. Tap, pause, tap. I wanted to run, but the clearing felt too still to move through. The wind had stopped. Even the smell of rain was gone. Only silence. And that hollow, waiting. A branch creaked above me. Something shifted inside the tree, scraping against the inner walls. I could almost feel it, moving higher, as if the trunk wasn't empty after all. Then I saw it, a pale hand pressing from within, stretching the bark outward. The wood groaned, splintered slightly, but it didn't break. The hand faded back, leaving only the faint outline beneath the bark. I stood frozen, the taste of metal in my mouth. The murmur started again, softer this time, almost gentle, like a lullaby sung through dirt. And then it stopped. Everything was still. The forest exhaled again, slow and long. I realized the faces on the bark were different now. One of them looked like me. I don't remember walking away. Only the sound of my heartbeat, too loud in the quiet, and that strange pull, like the hollow wanted me to come back. Even now, when the wind moves through the trees outside my window, I can hear it again, that same murmur, low, patient, calling me back to the forest, back to the hollow tree. It was late autumn. The forest was thinning, the air sharp with pine and rain. I'd been walking for hours, following no path, just a faint trail of ash-colored leaves. That's when I saw it. A cabin, small, crooked, pressed between the trees. Its roof sagged under years of moss and smoke stains, its chimney leaning like it had forgotten how to stand. The windows were dark. No candlelight, no reflection. Just glass so clouded it almost looked like skin. I don't know why I went closer. The air changed as I did, heavier, colder. The kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. The door was half open. A dull hinge trembled when the wind passed. Inside, there was nothing at first. Only dust and that faint scent, burnt wood and something older. A chair stood in the corner, turned slightly away from the table. On the table, a single cup, cracked but clean. The walls were covered with faint outlines, shadows of where things used to hang. Like the cabin remembered its own furniture. Then something shifted. A spoon rolled, slowly, as though nudged by a fingertip. I froze. There was no one, but I could feel movement. The air carried a low hum, soft, almost kind. A woman's voice, maybe, humming something without melody. It came from the far corner, near the stove. I turned my head, but the hum stopped, only the creak of the floorboards under my shoes. My throat felt dry. I wanted to leave, but the door had moved. It was closed now. No wind, no sound, just that quiet pressure that fills your chest when you know you're not alone. The spoon rolled again, toward me this time, stopped at the edge of my boot. Something brushed past my arm. Cold, like mist curling through fabric. I didn't move. Couldn't. The chair turned. Only a few inches, but enough. Enough to face me. The humming started again, lower this time, and I could hear breathing between the notes. Slow, uneven, like someone trying not to be heard. My eyes followed the sound to the stove. Its door was slightly open, dark inside, a faint warmth pulsing from within. Ash moved, like something exhaled beneath it. Then the walls, they began to whisper, with expanding, contracting, murmuring words that weren't words. The air thickened with static, invisible but alive. A cup slid off the table. It didn't shatter. It just landed, softly. The voice rose, not louder, but closer, humming right beside my ear now. I turned too fast. The whole room blurred, walls bending like fog. And then it stopped. Every sound drained out at once. The air went flat. Even the forest outside seemed to disappear. In that stillness, I saw the window again, but there was light in it now. A reflection. My own face, and behind it, another, pale, expressionless, looking out from inside the glass. I stepped back, hard in my throat. The reflection didn't move with me. It stayed there, watching, breathing slow, like it had all the time in the world. Something clicked inside the stove. Metal, snapping once. The air warmed, faintly, and the humming began again, softer, fading into the walls. I reached the door. This time it opened easily. The forest greeted me like it had been waiting. Still, wet, endless. When I turned back, the cabin looked different. Windows gone dark again. Roof still smoking faintly, though I hadn't seen fire. I started walking. The smell of burnt would follow me for miles. And sometimes, when the wind falls quiet, I still hear that hum, just beneath the trees. Waiting. The bridge was older than anyone remembered. Would gone soft, warped from years of rain and silence. It sat between two hills, forgotten in the fog. I came there just before dusk, when the air felt heavy, like the world had stopped breathing. The stream below moved slow, too slow, as if it didn't want to go anywhere. The boards groaned when I stepped on them. Soft, hollow, like something underneath was listening. Each footstep carried farther than it should. The smell of wet moss clung to my clothes. And in the air, a faint hum. Not wind, not insects. Something else. I told myself it was only the current. The bridge trembled slightly, though the water barely moved. I leaned on the railing. My hand came away, damp, sticky. Dark stains traced the grain of the wood. Not quite red, not quite brown. Across the stream, the fog thickened. It moved like breath, curling, folding. Shapes began to form in it. Just outlines at first. Long, slender. Moving against the current. I blinked. Gone. The water below looked black now. A slick mirror that didn't reflect me right. I bent closer. The reflection blinked slower than I did. Then it smiled. I stepped back, my heel catching a loose plank. It cracked. Something beneath the bridge shifted. A hollow splash, then stillness. The hum grew louder. It came from the wood itself. The railing pulsed under my hand. A slow, rhythmic throb, almost like breathing. When I looked down again, the stream wasn't black anymore. It was filled with faces. Pale, open-mouthed faces, drifting just below the surface. Their eyes rolled upward, glassy, unfocused, each one mouthing the same wordless whisper. Water bubbled through their lips. I wanted to run, but the air felt thick, like moving through sleep. The boards bowed under my weight. A low creak answered from somewhere below, drawn out, patient. Something brushing the underside of the bridge, moving from one end to the other. I froze. The fog around me began to spin slowly, coiling like smoke from a dying fire. Through it, faint outlines again, arms this time, reaching. I took another step back. Another creak, then silence. The hum stopped all at once. Even the stream forgot to move. Only the fog remained, and that faint smell of damp earth and old wood. When I finally turned to leave, my foot brushed something wedged between the planks. A strip of fabric. Faded, torn. A piece of someone's sleeve. I didn't pick it up. I just watched it sway in the wind that wasn't there. At the edge of the bridge, the ground felt firmer, the air lighter, but when I looked back, there was no bridge, only mist and the slow whisper water moving through something deep and unseen. I still hear it sometimes, in the quiet after rain, that soft beneath the floorboards, like it followed me home. It was colder than I remembered. The road had no name, just a stretch of wet dirt, curling into the woods like a half-forgotten path. Mist pressed against the trees, thick and unmoving. I could taste metal in the air, damp, old, like rain that never stopped falling. And then I saw it, a signpost, leaning slightly to the left, half swallowed by the fog. Its surface was a color of dried blood and rust. Letters almost gone, just a few shapes carved deep into the metal, but blurred by time, like someone tried to erase them with their hands. It swayed, just a little, a slow, uneasy motion, though there was no wind. The chain that held it creaked softly, a low, almost human sound. I thought it shouldn't be moving at all. Something about it pulled at me. I walked closer, each step pressed into mud that clung to my shoes, heavy and cold. The fog thinned for a moment, enough to see the trees around it, tall, still, their bark slick and black, as if wet with oil. Something moved between them, quick, like a breath I couldn't catch. I froze. There was no sound, just a faint hum again, that strange vibration in the air, not from the wind, not from the ground, from somewhere deeper. It felt like it was inside my chest, in my bones, almost like the air was humming my name. I took another step. The sign shivered again, chains rattling. I could see a faint symbol etched on its face now, a circle with something crossing through it. It looked hand-carved, uneven. I reached out. My fingers hovered just an inch away from the metal. It was wet, but warm. That stopped me. Metal shouldn't feel warm in this cold. The hum grew louder, or maybe closer. It came from behind me. No footsteps, no rustle, just the pressure being watched. I turned. The fog folded over itself, heavy and gray. Shapes moved again, slender, bent, too tall to be human. They flickered in and out like the mist was breathing them. Here, then gone. The humming stopped, and all that was left was a creaking of that rusted signpost. I don't know why, but I whispered something. A word, a name maybe. It came out on its own, soft and hoarse. The moment I spoke, the chain snapped. The sign twisted violently, slamming into the post. The metal rang through the air, sharp, endless. I stumbled back, my hands cold, palms slick with mud. When it stopped moving, it wasn't facing the road anymore. It had turned toward me. The faint letters on its face had changed. I swear they had. They weren't carved anymore. They were burned in. And though they were faint, I could still make them out under the rust. Stay. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, humming beneath my skin again, like it wanted to crawl inside. Behind me, the shapes had stopped moving. The forest had gone quiet. Too quiet. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. Then the creaking started again. But it wasn't the sign. It came from deeper in the woods, from several directions, like other signposts moving, swaying, turning toward me. I stepped back onto the road. The dirt squelched, sucking at my shoes like it didn't want to let me go. The fog began to thin just a little, and I saw more of them, dozens of crooked poles lining the edge of the path, each one broken, rusted, some fallen sideways, their signs unreadable, all pointing in different directions. But as I stood there, one by one, they began to turn, slowly, metal groaning, chain straining, until they all faced the same way, toward me. The hum came back, stronger now, vibrating through the air until I felt it under my ribs. It almost sounded like whispering, low, layered voices, speaking just beneath the edge of hearing. I couldn't understand the words, but the rhythm of it sounded like counting. 1, 2, 3. The fog swallowed the road ahead. My chest tightened. The warmth of the sign was still on my fingertips. I turned and ran. But even as I did, I could feel their weight behind me. All those rusted signs, shifting in unison, chains clinking softly, creaking together, as if watching me leave. When I finally reached the clearing, the air felt clean again, still cold, but lighter. I looked back only once. The road was gone. The fog, too. All that remained was a faint hum in the distance, like a voice swallowed by the earth. I don't take that route anymore. But sometimes, at night, when the air is still, I hear metal moving in the dark, a slow, tired creak, and I wonder the signs are still turning, still waiting. The mist hung low that night, almost level with the tops of the grass. It moved in slow breaths, like the forest was alive, inhaling through the soil. I remember the chill first. Not sharp, just steady, the kind that seeps in and stays. The moon sat high above the trees, pale and cold. It painted everything in that silvery light, the kind that hides more than it reveals. I had been walking for hours. The trail had long disappeared. All that was left was a sound beneath my shoes, the damp whisper of grass bowing under each step. Then the clearing opened up. It was wide, almost perfect in shape. The trees stood back like they were afraid of something there. The air felt wrong, still but breathing, quiet but not empty. And then I saw them. At first, I thought they were drops of dew, little glints on the grass, catching moonlight. But they moved. They blinked. Eyes. Not human, not animal. Just shapes, pulsing faintly, like reflections that weren't waiting for anything to reflect. I froze. Every blade of grass around me seemed to tilt toward them, and for a moment I thought the forest leaned too, as if listening. There was a hum beneath everything, low, deep, almost like the ground had a heartbeat. The eyes shifted again. 1, 2, then dozens. They blinked in waves, slow and patient. Some near, some farther back, but none attached to anything I could see. The mist thickened. It brushed against my arms, cool and damp, smelled faintly of wet bark and iron. I could feel each inhale of the forest matching my own. When I blinked, the eyes blinked too, perfectly timed. It took me too long to notice, too long to understand that whatever they were watching me breathe. A soft rustle to my right. Then behind, grass bending, but no footsteps. No sound of movement, just a rhythm, a pulsing in the soil beneath my shoes. My throat felt tight. The air was too heavy to swallow. I wanted to back away, but every direction looked the same. The mist made walls where there were none, and through those walls, the eyes multiplied. They flickered like embers in water. Each blinked slower than the last, as if the forest was growing tired of pretending to be quiet. Something brushed against my leg. Cold, wet, gone. When I looked down, nothing but bent grass. But in the reflection of dew, I thought I saw my own eye looking back at me. The hum rose. It wasn't in the air anymore. It was in me, in my ribs, my ears, my teeth. A single breath escaped me, and the eyes answered. Hundreds of tiny blinks, each one closing in, rippling to the clearing like a wave of pupils closing at once. Then silence, complete, as if the forest itself had stopped breathing. The grass no longer swayed. The mist hung still, thick and unmoving, as though it too was watching. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't before. The eyes weren't watching me. They were waiting for me to blink first. When I finally did, just once, everything vanished. The clearing went dark. The hum stopped, and I was left alone, standing in grass that didn't move, in air that didn't breathe. Only the faintest echo remained, a whisper that wasn't really a sound, but a thought left behind in the mist. It said, "Now you see." The moon drifted behind the trees. The clearing dimmed, and all around me, the forest exhaled again, softly, patiently, as if it had been waiting a very long time. It was just after dusk when I started walking home. The fog had settled early that evening, a pale, drifting wall that swallowed the trees and the dirt path ahead. Each step I took was soft, damp earth pressing beneath my shoes. The air smelled of wet leaves and something faintly metallic, like rain that never really came. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Too quiet. Even the crickets had gone still. Then I heard it. A single, faint footstep behind me. Slow, measured, in rhythm with my own. I stopped. The sound stopped. For a moment, I thought it was an echo, but echoes don't breathe. And I could hear breathing, soft, uneven, close enough to miss the back of my neck. I turned. The fog was thick, pale shapes swirling in the air like smoke. Nothing there, just the empty trail stretching back toward the woods. I started walking again, a little faster, and the footsteps returned, one by one, behind me, matching mine perfectly. I felt the hairs on my arms lift, the way they do before lightning. My pulse began to count each step for me. Thud, step, thud, step. The air felt heavier. Every breath I took came back damp, like breathing through cloth. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped, or maybe it was closer. I couldn't tell anymore. I told myself not to look back, that if I didn't see it, it couldn't be real. But my body didn't listen. I turned again. The fog shifted, and for a second, I thought I saw something, a shape darker than the mist, still and waiting. Then it faded, leaving only silence. My hands were trembling now, not from cold, but from the weight of being watched. The path curved ahead, narrow between the trees. Their branches hung low, dripping from the fog. Each drop that hit the leaves above me sounded like a whisper. I moved quicker, and the footsteps did too. I stopped suddenly, held my breath. Silence. Then, one step closer, another. The air behind me stirred, not wind, but something heavier, like a presence moving through water. I whispered, without meaning to, "Who's there?" The words came out small, and the fog swallowed them whole. No reply, only breathing, a slow, deliberate inhale, then nothing. I could feel my heart pushing against my ribs. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused to move. When I finally forced them to, I didn't care about direction. I just ran. The path blurred under my feet. Branches scraped my shoulders, my face. But I didn't stop. Behind me, still there, footsteps. Faster now, in perfect time with mine. Not chasing, just following. I could hear the rhythm change, like whoever was trying to stay close, but not be seen. Every time my foot hit the ground, I waited for the next one. It always came. The fog thickened until it felt alive, curling around my ankles, pulling at my sleeves. And through it, I could feel warmth at my back, as if someone was close enough to reach out. Then I saw the light, a porch lamp, faint and golden through the trees. Home. I sprinted toward it. The moment I reached the gate, the footsteps stopped. Completely. I turned again, chest heaving, throat burning. The fog stood still behind me, pale and endless. No movement, no shape, nothing but the hush of the night. I stepped backward, one hand on the fence. Still nothing. But I could feel it, the weight of eyes that didn't blink. I hurried inside, locked the door, stood in the hallway listening. For a long time, there was nothing but the faint ticking of the clock. Then from outside, a soft crunch of gravel. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. They circled the house once, then stopped below my window. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The floor creaked as I leaned closer to the glass. Outside, only fog, a pale blur pressing against the pane. I waited, long enough for my heartbeat to steady, long enough to believe it was over. Then, faint but clear, a single step, right behind me. I turned, nothing there, just the empty room, and the sound of my own breathing. But in the corner of the fog window, a shape lingered, a faint outline of a footprint, facing inward. It was autumn again. The air had that weight to it, cold, but soft like the forest was breathing slow. The leaves whispered under my shoes, and somewhere ahead, a light flickered, a lantern, swaying between the trees. It wasn't bright, more like a pulse, a faint heartbeat of gold in the dark. I thought it was someone walking the trail, a night hiker, maybe, but the woods here were empty. They always were. I called out once. The word came back thin, carried by the fog. No answer. Just a low hum of the wind pressing through branches. The lantern moved again. Left, then right, like it was waiting for me to follow. I did. My breath came out white, and I could feel my heartbeat inside my ears. Each step made the earth groan. Wet roots, soft mud clinging to my boots. The light ahead drifted farther, just out of reach. But I could see it. The outline of a figure, shoulders bent, moving slow, as if carrying something heavy. When I blinked, it was gone. Only darkness now, thicker than before. I stood still, listening. There was something, a low hum again, not the wind this time. It had a rhythm, almost like a voice. I couldn't make out the words. Just a single note, drawn out, fading through the trees. I whispered low, and the hum stopped. Silence pressed in. So deep I could hear the small tick of my heartbeat against my coat zipper. Then a breath, right beside me. Cold, damp air brushed my neck. The faint smell of smoke and wet metal. I turned slowly. The lantern was back. Closer now, hanging in the air, though I could see no hand holding it. Its flame was steady, but inside it I saw movement. Tiny shadows swirling, like ash underwater. I took a step back. The light pulsed once, and the trees seemed to bend toward it. The voice came again, clearer now, low, almost kind. It said my name, not loud, just enough that I felt it in my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs felt sunk into the soft ground. The lantern tilted like a head, watching me. Then it began to drift away. Slow, measured. The hum returned, a lullaby without words. I followed again. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to be alone. Maybe I thought it would lead me out. The forest grew tighter. Branches brushed my arms, scratching through my jacket. Somewhere in the dark, water dripped. Steady, hollow. The lantern stopped at a clearing. Mist rolled low across the ground. I could see a shape beneath the fog. An old post, wood rotted through, metal hooks still hanging from it. The lantern rested there, as if placed back home. I waited for the figure, for the keeper, but no one came. Only the hum remained, circling the air, fading into the trees. I stepped closer. The light trembled once, then dimmed, until all that was left was a soft orange thread, like the last ember of a dying fire. Then darkness. No more hum, no more breath, only the scent of burned oil and damp leaves. When I turned back, the trail was gone. Every direction looked the same. Every tree leaned inward, listening. And somewhere deep in the forest, a new light flickered, another lantern moving between the trees. Slow, waiting, as if the keeper had found someone new to follow. The trail was quiet that evening. A pale fog hung low, pressing close to the ground like it didn't want to leave. The trees bending toward each other, their branches laced, blocking what little light remained. It smelled like wet earth and stone. Cold, still. I'd walked this path before, but that night something felt different. Every step sank into the dirt, deeper than it should have. And up ahead, I saw it, a boulder, huge, gray, and split through the center. It sat half buried in the earth, like something had dropped it there long ago. But there was a hollow space inside, a dark mouth. The air around it buzzed, not loud, just a soft hum that settled into my bones. When I moved closer, the trees behind me stopped whispering. Everything went quiet, except for that low, steady breath from within the rock. I thought it was the wind, but the air was still, utterly still. Then, faintly, I heard it, a whisper, so light it could have been inside my head. It said my name. I froze. My mouth went dry, the fog brushing against my face like damp cloth. The whisper came again, longer this time. Not a word I could understand. Just a tone familiar, almost kind. I took another step forward. The hollow was wide enough to crawl into. Smooth stone walls. A soft pulse of air coming out, slow and cold. Something about it felt alive. I knelt beside it. My reflection shimmered faintly in a thin sheen of moisture across the stone. I could see my eyes, then, slowly, something else beside them. A shape darker than the rest. It leaned closer from inside. I stumbled back. The whisper grew sharper, a hiss cutting through the fog. It wasn't calling me anymore. It was warning. Behind me, the trail had changed. The trees weren't the same shape. Their shadows stretched toward the rock. Too long, bending around me like reaching arms. Every branch pointed back to that hollow. I tried to turn away, but the hum inside my chest wouldn't let me. It felt like a heartbeat, syncing with mine. One slow pulse, then another. I could feel the air pulling me closer again, like it wanted me to listen, to lean in. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did. The whisper became clearer. Not words, just breathing. A rhythm that matched the fog curling to the gap, wrapping around my wrist. The stone was cold when I touched it, damp, rough, and faintly trembling beneath my fingers. There was something moving inside. I leaned closer until my ear nearly brushed the edge. And then silence. Total. No hum. No wind. Even my heartbeat seemed to stop. And in that stillness, a breath right against my ear. Too close to be real. I fell backward, scraping my hand against the dirt. The hollow gaped wider, as though it had inhaled. Inside, the dark seemed to ripple. Faint, human shapes pressed just beneath the stone surface, shifting, waiting. The whisper came again, not one voice, but many, layered, overlapping. They weren't calling me this time. They were repeating. Repeating something I had said earlier that day. Every word, every hesitation, every breath. I stood frozen until the fog swallowed the path. When I blinked, the hollow looked smaller. Just a stone, just still air. But the ground beneath my feet hummed once more, like a memory. And when I finally turned away, the whisper followed, faint, trailing behind me through the trees. It hasn't stopped since. It started with the wind. Not a storm, not even a breeze at first. Just a faint pull of air, moving through the trees like a whisper that didn't belong to the night. The branches leaned. Their shadows stretched long across the path, thin and uncertain. I could smell the damp bark, the wet soil beneath my shoes. Everything around me was soft, too soft, as if the world was holding its breath. The wind rose again. It threaded through grass, around my legs. Cold, gentle, but it carried something with it. A voice, maybe two, distant, almost like a hum pressed against my ear. I stopped walking. The fog ahead swayed, pale ribbons curling between the trunks. Each time the wind moved, it seemed to shift the world a little, bending the air, bending the trees, like they were breathing. I told myself it was nothing, just night air, just fatigue. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew clearer, closer. I turned. No one, just branches brushing against one another, their tips sharp and thin against the gray sky. But when I faced forward again, there was movement, something low to the ground, a flicker between the trunks. I froze. My breath left a white cloud. The shape didn't move right. It swayed with the fog, then sank into it like it had never been there. The wind circled back. It wrapped around my coat, tugging at the edges. There was a rhythm in it now, almost like speech, almost like breathing in reverse. I started walking again, one foot after the other, gravel crunching beneath me. The forest floor smelled like rain and iron. Somewhere an owl called, one long, low note, then silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until your heart feels too loud. I glanced behind me again. This time I saw it, not clearly, just enough to know it was wrong. A tall outline standing between the birches. The fog clung to it. The wind bent around it, like it was avoiding the space it filled. My mouth went dry. The air felt heavier, colder. The whispers turned to a low hum, one I could feel in my teeth. Every part of me wanted to run, but I didn't, because the moment I thought of moving, the wind stopped. All at once. No rustle, no hum, no air. The forest stood still. The silence was too clean, too sharp, and in that stillness, I could hear breathing. Behind me, slow, uneven, pulling the cold air in, letting it out, right at the back of my neck. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The air started to move again, not as wind, but as something else. A pulse that carried through the trees, through my ribs, through the ground itself. It whispered my name. I don't know how I knew, but I did. The shape in the fog leaned forward, and the wind carried the voice again, stretched and broken, like it was being dragged across the sky. I backed away. The fog thickened with every step, curling around my ankles, rising to my knees. It smelled different now, like old earth, like metal and ash. Each breath stung the back of my throat. I could hear the branches swaying again, though there was no wind now. They scraped against one another like something restless, waiting. When I reached the clearing, the air changed. It was warmer here. Still heavy, still strange, but quieter. The trees opened above me, their tops lost in a slow swirl of gray. And then I realized something that made my skin crawl. The wind, it wasn't moving the branches. The branches were moving on their own. They turned toward me, hundreds of them, creaking softly in the dim light, each one pointing, trembling slightly in the hush. I closed my eyes. The air brushed past again, one last breath against my cheek, and I heard it, clear this time. Stay. The voice was neither close nor far. It was inside the wind, inside the fog, inside me. When I opened my eyes, everything was still. The fog had settled low to the ground. No shape, no whisper, no breath, just a steady hum of night insects beginning again, as if nothing had ever happened. I walked home through the quiet. The path behind me was empty. But sometimes when the night wind moves through the trees again, it sounds like words, like something trying to remember how to speak. And if I stop and listen long enough, it almost sounds like my own voice. It was deeper in the woods than I remembered. The air felt heavier there, like the trees had learned to breathe slower. I almost walked past it, what was left of the cabin. The roof had caved in, half swallowed by the forest floor, drowned in leaves and moss. The walls leaned inward, like they were bound to something still standing inside. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe it was the way the light bent, pale and weak through the branches. Or maybe it was the faint rhythm beneath the wind, the hush of something speaking. I told myself it was just the trees rubbing together. But the leaves on the ground, they shifted in small, deliberate waves, like breath, like someone was exhaling beneath them. I stepped closer. The air changed, colder, damp with the smell of rot and old ash. A sweetness underneath, faint and wrong. My boots sank into the soft earth. Dust lifted from the broken beams, slow and weightless, spiraling through the air. It didn't move like dust. It moved like it was alive. I reached the doorframe. Only one hinge remained. The other side was buried under a slope of fallen planks, bones of the cabin's ribs poking through. The murmurs grew clearer. Not words, exactly, just the shape of them, like overhearing a conversation in another room. The tone warm, the meaning gone. It was almost comforting. Almost. Inside, the floor had caved in two. Leaves had filled the hollow where a table once stood. A single chair still upright, perfectly balanced. I took a step toward it. The boards creaked beneath me, soft as sighs, and the murmuring stopped. Silence folded in, thick enough to touch. I froze. My breath sounded too loud, too human. Then a faint shift, something beneath the leaves, like a hand brushing against them from below. Not clawing, just searching. The dust rose again, slow, elegant spirals twisting toward the broken ceiling beams. It gathered in small clouds, then drifted sideways as if following something invisible. My chest felt tight. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. There was something gentle in the air, a sadness, so quiet it felt sacred. The chair moved, barely, just enough to scrape against the floor. It sounded like someone standing up. I backed toward the doorway. My foot pressed against a plank. The hollow echo beneath it didn't belong to wood. It belonged to space. I lifted the plank. Underneath, a small cavity. Inside it, a tin cup, and next to it, a photograph. A man and a woman, standing in front of the same cabin, smiling. The same slope of trees behind them. Only the cabin wasn't broken then. I felt the breath again, not air, but the presence of it. Close. Behind me, the dust around me thickened. It gathered above the chair, drifting in soft columns. And for a heartbeat, the shape of shoulders appeared. A faint outline human, but blurred like fog seen through tears. The murmuring returned, quieter now, as if it was being spoken directly into the wood. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone, it was tender, grieving. I placed the photo back under the plank. The air eased. The murmuring softened to nothing. Only the leaves whispered again, brushing lightly against each other, like applause fading away. When I stepped outside, the forest was still. Even the insects had stopped. The light had changed, dull gray now, like the world was holding its breath. I looked back once. The cabin no longer looked ruined. For a moment, just a moment, the shape seemed whole, the roof intact, smoke curling from a chimney that no longer existed. Then I blinked, and it was gone again, just a heap of broken beams and dust. But the silence stayed with me, the kind that follows a voice you almost remember. As I walked back through the trees, the air grew warmer. The forest began to breathe again. Still, every few steps, I thought I heard it, the soft rhythm beneath the wind, a conversation continuing, somewhere behind me, and though I never turned around, I knew the cabin hadn't fallen at all. It had only been waiting for someone to listen. It was late autumn when I started hearing it again, that low, trembling hum beneath the roots, the kind of sound that makes the air feel thick, like the forest is breathing beneath you. I'd come back to the cabin after years away. The trees had grown closer since then, leaning toward the roof like they'd been waiting. The nights were longer here, the silence heavier. Even the stars seemed dimmer behind the branches. I remember standing on the porch, hearing the leaves shift, though nothing moved. Not the wind, not even a whisper, just the slow creak of the wood beneath my feet. And then that hum, low, deep, constant. It came from somewhere below the soil, like a heartbeat buried under roots. I told myself it was a generator, old pipes, a memory of something mechanical. But the longer I listened, the more it felt alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear it, a vibration to the floorboards, a faint shiver up my spine. And then the eyes. At first, I thought it was a reflection of the lantern. Two faint points of light, high up, just above the tree lean. But they blinked, a pale shimmer, gone, then back again. Watching. I stood at the window for an hour, barely breathing. Each time I looked away, the branches seemed to shift closer. Something brushed the roof, a slow drag of bark on metal. The hum deepened. I felt it in my chest now, a pulse that wasn't mine. I whispered to myself, trying to fill the silence. But the forest listened. It always listened. By morning, the air was gray and wet. Mist clung to the trees, hiding their shapes. I walked out to the edge of the clearing. The soil was soft, too soft, as if it had been disturbed. Something had been there, standing between the trunks, watching the cabin all night. The branches above me were still trembling. No wind, no birds, just that faint hum again, rolling under the surface of the earth. I pressed my hand against a tree. Cold bark, wet moss, and beneath it vibration, like it was breathing. When I pulled away, something darker seeped between the cracks. Sap but too thick, too black. I stepped back, and the forest exhaled. Every leaf rustled at once, like it had been holding its breath. That night, I kept the lantern low. I didn't want it to see me watching. Didn't want it to know I knew. The hum came earlier this time. Steadier, deeper. The soil beneath the cabin trembled in rhythm. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just my mind filling the silence. But when I looked out the window again, the eyes were closer. No longer in the trees. Lower now, at the edge of the clearing. Still, patient, reflecting the faint orange of the lantern. The hum stopped. The silence after was worse. So wide it pressed against my ears. And then a soft, wet crack of wood. A branch falling? No, too slow. Something heavy shifted its weight above the cabin. I could hear it move, each creak of the roof deliberate, measured. I held my breath. Even the air refused to stir. The eyes vanished again. But I could feel them, somewhere behind the walls, tracking the smallest sound I made. I didn't sleep that night, just waited for the sun to rise. When it finally did, the forest looked normal again. Still, empty, but the footprints were there. Deep, sunken impressions leading from the edge of the clearing to the base of the largest tree. Each step pressed into ground, as though something impossibly heavy had passed through. At the last print, the soil was split open, a hollow space beneath, and from inside that hum again, soft, endless. I dropped the lantern, watched its flame flicker out on the wet ground. When I looked up, the eyes were back, high in the branches, hidden in the fog, still watching, always watching. The forest didn't want me here, but it didn't want me to leave either. Now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel it, that hum beneath my ribs, that slow, patient breath rising from the roots. It's waiting, just beyond the tree line, and I think it never stopped watching. The creek ran behind the old trail, thin and pale, like a scar through the forest. The air was colder there, even in summer, even when the rest of the woods shimmered with heat and gnats and lazy light. Here it was still. The water barely moved, just a slow ripple that bent the reflection of trees and sky. But there was no wind, not even the faintest breath from the leaves above. I remember crouching near the edge, mud soft beneath my shoes. It had a strange color to it, not brown, not green, something in between, like the color of wet stone, if it could breathe. The hum started then, low, barely there. Not quite a sound, more like the air itself was shivering. When I leaned closer, I saw it, a shape moving just on the surface. Pale, long, almost human, but not. It drifted beneath the ripples, slow and smooth, as if following the curve of the creek. I thought it might be a fish, or the light bending wrong. But then it stopped. Right below me, the hum deepened. It pressed against my chest like a small vibration, something alive but hidden. The water went flat, so flat that the trees reflected perfectly, except for the small place where my shadow broke it. And in that shadow, eyes opened, not in the water, in the reflection. They were mine, but they blinked when I didn't. I stepped back, the mud sighed under my heel. Ripples spread, gentle, careful, like something exhaling beneath the current. When I looked again, the reflection was gone. The creek looked normal, water running softly between stones. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I'd been staring too long. But when I turned to leave, I heard something following the rhythm of my steps. Not footsteps, not splashing, just movement, in sync with mine, hidden under the low hum of the air. I stopped. It stopped. The forest waited. Even the flies had gone silent. Then came the faintest whisper of water shifting. Not from the center of the creek, but from the bank, right behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The vibration grew again, this time higher, like a thread pulled too tight. It ran through the trees, through my spine, through the ground itself. Something brushed against my ankle. Cold, wet. It didn't feel like water. It felt like breath. When I looked down, nothing was there, just the mud, just a reflection of trees. But the water, it wasn't still anymore. Shapes were gliding beneath it. Dozens, all pale, all slow, weaving between each other in patterns that made no sense. Their faces flickered up for a moment. Soft outlines, mouths closed, eyes open. Each time I blinked, they vanished. Each time I blinked again, they were closer. The hum filled my ears until it was all I could hear. Not a sound, but a presence. A silent call in my bones. I stumbled backward, but the air felt thick, like walking through water. One last shape rose near the middle of the creek. It didn't vanish. It stayed, head tilted, pale and formless. I thought I saw its lips move. Not words, just the idea of them. And then, quietly, it sank back into dark. The hum faded. The trees began to rustle again. Somewhere, a bird called once, hesitant. The creek rippled, as if nothing had ever been there. But when I stepped away, the mud still trembled beneath my feet. And in the faintest shimmer of water, something mirrored me again, half a second too late. I never went back to that part of the woods. But sometimes, on still nights, I hear it again, that low, living vibration just below silence, like the creek is waiting. The fog settled low over the clearing. It pressed against my chest, damp and cold. I could see the outlines of tents sagging, their fabric wet and gray. A lantern hung crooked on a tree branch. Its light wavered, a soft pulse. Then nothing. I stepped closer. The ground was damp, the grass slick under my fingers. Each footfall sounded too loud, too sharp. There was a smell, smoke, faint, old, a scent that made my throat tighten. I drew in the air slowly, trying to tell myself it was just a fog. A tent collapsed. I hadn't touched it. Its frame bent and gave way with a quiet snap. The canvas shivered as if breathing. Shadows pooled between the trees. Not one, but many. They drifted slowly. Edges blurred. Then gone. A whisper touched the air. I couldn't make the words out. Just a soft swell of a voice, almost like it belonged to the wind. It moved around me, curling close to my ears. I swallowed. My hands shook without reason. The lantern flickered again. A quick flare of light, revealing something crouched just beyond the trees. Then it vanished. I tried to step back. Branches scraped my arms. A cold sting, sudden. I looked down. Mud clung to my shoes like fingers. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same. It was heavier, thick with anticipation. A tent flap rustled, not with wind, with something inside moving, slow, deliberate. I froze. The whispers grew, layering, overlapping. No one spoke, but I felt them circling. Every step I tried to take was mirrored by a faint, echoing step behind me. I reached for the lantern. The metal was warm, almost alive. Its light stretched across the clearing in pale arcs. And for a moment, the shadows hesitated. Then the trees themselves seemed to lean closer. Branches pressed against the mist, scratched against the tents. The whispers followed the rhythm of their sway. I noticed something on the ground, a small footprint, bare, muddy. It led to a collapsed tent. Inside, the lantern light caught on a pale handprint pressed against the canvas. I stepped closer. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic. The handprint trembled, or maybe it was a lantern. I couldn't tell. A soft sigh came from the darkness. Or maybe it came from me. I could no longer tell where I ended, and the clearing began. The lantern flickered again, and I saw them, shapes indistinct, standing at the edge of the trees, motionless, yet watching. The fog curled around them. They waited, patient. I wanted to speak. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Only the whispers answered me, brushing against my skin like dry leaves. I turned to leave, feet dragging, hesitant. Every step echoed into silence, yet the whispers followed, fading only when the trees swallowed the lantern's glow. I stopped. The clearing lay empty. No shadows, no shapes, only tents, still damp and lifeless. But the smell lingered, the soft metallic scent, reminding me of what I couldn't see. I took a breath, felt the mist curl around my face. I knew I wasn't alone, and the lantern flickered one last time. Then, silence. The fog was heavier than before. It pressed against my face, damp and cold. The air smelled like wet soil and something faintly sweet, like rot. I followed the path because it was supposed to lead home. But each turn looked the same crooked tree, the same patch of stones half sunk into the mud. My shoes made no sound. Even the forest seemed to be holding its breath. Somewhere, far off, a low hum trembled through the mist, soft at first, then closer. I stopped. The hum stopped too. When I walked again, it started once more. A voice, maybe. Not words, just a tune. Something I almost recognized. The trail twisted again, too sharply. I could see the prints I'd left before, facing me from the wrong direction, as if I'd walked in a circle or something else had followed my path. The fog moved in slow waves, brushing against my sleeves. Each breath came out white and thin. I could smell pine sap, wet bark, and something faintly metallic. I whispered, "Hello?" It disappeared into the mist. No echo, no return. There was a shape ahead, dark, still waiting. At first I thought it was a tree, but trees don't tilt their heads. The hum turned sharper, a faint vibration under my skin. It called my name, broken in half by static. Not loud, almost gentle, like someone speaking from the bottom of a pond. My heart pushed against my ribs, slow and heavy. I took one step forward. The shape did the same. The fog thinned just enough to show a shoulder, an outline too familiar, clothes that looked like mine, hair moving in a wind that wasn't there. I blinked, and it was gone. Only the path remained, leading deeper instead of out. My fingers brushed the side of a tree. The bark felt warm, damp, like skin. I pulled my hand back. The hum cracked once, sharp like a broken wire. The path split ahead, left or right, both swallowed in white. I could feel the ground tilt slightly under my feet, like I was standing on something hollow. The voice came again, closer this time. It hummed the same low tune. My name slipped between the notes, so soft it almost sounded kind. I turned toward it. The fog parted just enough to show movement, a flicker, pale and human-shaped, gliding between the trees. Every step I took forward, the air thickened, and my ears filled with a soft, rhythmic pulse. My own heartbeat, or not mine at all. There was no end to the path now. It kept folding back, branches leaning in, roots twisting across the dirt like veins. The hum was above me now, then below, then right behind my shoulder. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The trees whispered, not in words, but in the way leaves brushed each other, like breath through teeth. I walked faster, the fog curling around my ankles, pulling, tugging. Something brushed my arm. Cold, but not air. Something that wanted me to stop. When I looked down, there were footprints beside mine. Fresh, pressed deep into the mud, but they led backward into the fog I'd already passed through. I couldn't tell if they were mine. The hum rose, long, steady, a single tone vibrating through the ground. It felt inside my chest now, echoing through bone. Then silence. Everything stilled. Even the fog froze in place. The trail ended at a clearing I didn't remember. A single lantern hung from a branch, its flame unmoving, its light pale and sickly. There was something standing beneath it, barefoot, still, the same height as me, the same face, only softer, like it had been forgotten halfway through being made. It tilted its head, and I felt my mouth move, though I didn't speak. The fog wrapped around us both, tight, like it didn't want to let either of us go. And when the light went out, I kept walking, because the path still whispered my name. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet. Fallen leaves crunched faintly under my feet. A pale light filtered through the bare branches, casting long, trembling shadows. I noticed it first because of the dark hollow, a log, split and fallen across the trail. Its inside yawning, like an open mouth, darker than the night itself. I knelt. The air around it was colder here, heavier. I thought I felt the soft pulse of breath brushing against my hand. It couldn't be. I pulled back. A shadow moved along the curve of the log. Slow, curling, almost playful. But wrong. It wasn't playful. It lingered at the edges, hesitant, patient. I leaned closer. A sound whispered from inside, low, wet, distorted. Breathing. Not mine. I held my own, hoping it might vanish if I stayed silent. But it did not. The hollow seemed to stretch deeper than I could see. Even as I peered, the darkness shifted. A tiny glow of damp reflected faintly, then vanished. Something pressed against the bark, subtle, slithering, soft, almost like fingernails tracing the curve. I wanted to step back, but my feet were rooted, eyes locked to that hollow. My skin prickled with something older than fear. Rustling came from inside, deliberate, slow. It wasn't leaves, not wind. I leaned closer still. A faint, wet smell. Earth and decay, yes, but something metallic underneath. A pulse of heat, or was it breath? Brushed my cheek. I froze. The shadows around the log curled tighter. The forest seemed to hold its own breath. Even the distant hum of the creek faded. I want to call out. The sound lodged in my throat. A flicker of movement. Small, quick. The hollow seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting just slightly. I imagined eyes there. Imagined teeth. I wanted to imagine it gone, but it stayed. I crouched lower. The bark was damp beneath my fingers. A shiver ran up my arm, like static across bare skin. The hollow inhaled, deep and slow. I felt in my chest. Something shifted behind me. Not fully, Just the softest brush of sound. Footsteps? No. Too deliberate. Too close. I turned slowly and the forest looked the same. Empty. Pale light spilling across the leaves. Yet the hollow called again. Subtly, I pressed my palm to the log. A shudder passed beneath, a soft trembling that reached my bones. The breathing inside grew more distinct, irregular, almost playful again, or mocking. I could not tell the difference. A shadow slid out from the hollow's mouth, thin, curling, gone as quickly as it appeared. I blinked, and only darkness remained. I could hear it, though, whispered breath, shallow, rhythmic, alive. I backed away. Leaves pressed wet against my shoes. My own heart beat loud, echoing in my ears. I kept my eyes on the log, on that yawning darkness. It seemed to stretch farther into the earth, swallowing light. A faint, almost sweet smell rose from inside. Rotting wood and something else, sticky, sharp. I wanted to run, but my feet dragged along the moss. Soft steps, silent but steady, followed. I could feel them, not see them. I turned fully once, twice. Nothing. The forest swallowed all else. Only the log remained, yawning, patient. I stepped closer again. Curiosity, dread, some foolish hope, all tangled. The breathing grew slower, then a pause, then a sigh, or my imagination. I could not tell. I knelt, fingers brushing the hollow's edge. The cold seeped into me. Something shifted inside. Something long, unseen, moving just out of reach. Shadows quivered along the log's curve. I pulled back. A gust of wind rattled the bare branches, carrying whispers I could almost recognize. Soft footsteps receded, or maybe my own imagination followed. The hollow remained dark and empty, patient as the forest itself. I left the log behind. The pale light faded into dusk. The forest quiet returned, though nothing felt the same. I could still hear it, breathing, waiting. Even now, when the wind rustles across the trees, I feel it, the hollow log yawning alive in shadow. And I wonder if it remembers me as I remember it. The fog was thick, pressing against my skin like cold silk. The gate leaned, crooked and rusted, its hinges barely holding. I stepped closer. The metal smelled of wet earth and decay. Shapes moved beyond it, slow, almost reluctant. I tried to focus, but the fog blurred them, blending them with shadows, with the mist curling over the ground. A soft hum rose beneath my feet, low and hollow, like the earth itself was breathing. I froze. My heartbeat, loud and uneven, filled my ears. There was something in the sway of the trees, something that shouldn't move in the wind. Soft footsteps, mine or someone else's, echoed in the quiet. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to run. But curiosity pulled me, subtle and insistent, closer to the leaning gate. The hum thickened, vibrating under the soles of my shoes. A shape shifted sharply, a silhouette I could not name. I blinked. It was gone, but the impression lingered, tall, thin, unnaturally still. I swallowed. My breath came in little wisps, cold and damp. The fog was alive, or so it seemed, curling around the gate's bars like slow smoke. Rust crept along the metal, orange and wet, dripping onto the soil. I could feel the vibration of the hum in my chest, like a pulse that wasn't mine. Something soft brushed my arm, a branch or a hand. I jerked back. Silence. Then the hum returned, higher now, almost a whisper. I leaned closer, trying to see past the gate. Shapes moved again, shapes that didn't belong to the fog. They lingered, half-glimpsed, half-dreamed, just beyond reach. The ground smelled of wet leaves and iron. I stepped on something that crunched, and the sound snapped through the fog, sharper than I expected. A shadow shifted just inside the gate, and the humming softened, as if listening. I should have left. My instinct screamed it, but my feet moved slowly forward, as though the fog had a hand on my shoulder. Every step made the hum rise and fall, like breathing in a rhythm older than me. The shapes seemed to lean closer, though nothing stepped forward. Something cold grazed my cheek, a whisper of air or something alive. I felt watched from every angle, though the fog hid all eyes. The gate shuddered, rust flakes falling like soft rain. The hum dipped low, then rose in a wave that seemed to pull at my bones. I realized I could not hear my own breath over it. I pressed my hand to the cold metal. The shapes recoiled, then flowed again, moving with a grace that made the mist itself seem alive. A single, pale light flickered behind the gate, shifting, uncertain. I wanted to reach out, to touch what I could not name, but the hum pressed against my skull now, soft yet insistent, and I remembered how alone I really was. The fog swallowed the shapes. I stepped back. The gate leaned the same, crooked and quiet. The hum faded slowly like a sigh from the earth. I stayed there, watching, feeling the lingering weight of eyes that were gone. The air smelled of wet iron and leaves. The fog curled at my feet, quiet, patient, waiting. I left the gate behind. But the humming never fully left. The fog lay thick over the hill. Each blade of grass was damp, bending beneath the weight of dew. I could see the lantern first, faint and wavering, perched alone at the rise. It didn't burn like a normal flame. It pulsed, soft orange light spilling into the mist, dissolving into shadows. I walked, slowly, each step sinking into the wet earth. The shadows moved before me, not like they had weight, just shifted around the lantern. They disappeared when I drew closer. Every time, a hum rose from somewhere near the light, low, almost gentle, like someone was humming a lullaby to the night itself. But it made the hairs on my neck stiffen. It filled the fog, creeping into the marrow of my bones. I reached the base of the hill. The lantern was closer now. I could smell the cold iron of wet soil, the damp leaves underfoot, and the hum had grown into a rhythm, slow, repeating, soft but urgent. I stepped up the rise. The lantern flickered when I moved. I thought maybe it wanted me to come, or to stop. I couldn't tell which. The shadows gathered, not in any shape I could name. They pressed close to the lantern, then scattered when I stepped forward. I tried to hold my breath, tried to hold the silence, but the fog swallowed both. I heard footsteps behind me. Not mine, not human, soft, careful, matching the rhythm of the hum. I didn't dare turn. Closer. The light was warmer now, almost familiar. I reached out, fingers brushing the cool metal of the lantern. It shivered under my touch. The shadows recoiled, then melted into the mist. I thought I heard a whisper, or maybe I imagined it. It was inside my head more than around me, almost soothing, almost threatening. A single word, or maybe a song. I couldn't tell the difference. The hill was silent again. The hum faded to the edges of perception, but the lantern remained, flickering, waiting. I wanted to leave. My legs wouldn't move. I felt eyes on me, not human eyes. Something watching from the fog behind me, something patient. The wind rose then. Not a gust, not a breeze, just a stirring of the night. It carried the smell of smoke, wet earth, and something faintly metallic. The lantern trembled. The shadows pulsed distant now. I blinked, and the hill was empty. The lantern stood alone. No hum, no whisper, just a pale light spilling into the fog. I stepped back. The ground was cold beneath my fingers when I touched it. The mist clung to me like memory. I could still feel the hum vibrating under my skin, a reminder that it hadn't left. I turned toward the path. Slow footsteps followed, but never reached me. Every step forward felt heavier. Every breath tasted of iron and ash. The lantern stayed behind me, bright against the gray fog, silent, watching. I didn't look back again, but I could feel it, always there, waiting. And sometimes when the night is quiet, I can hear the faintest hum. A lullaby that belongs to no one, or to everyone. The clearing was pale under the moon. Fog curled around the gnarled roots, drifting low, heavy. I could feel it cling to my ankles, cold and damp. The trees leaned closer than they should have, their shadows stretching long. Thin fingers across the soft ground. Every step I took made the fog stir, murmuring against itself. A whisper ran through the tree line. Not words I could catch, just the breath of voices brushing past, teasing the edges of my hearing. I froze. The fog thickened, pressing against my chest, filling my lungs with damp earth. Leaves rustled, though the air was still. The The moonlight painted the roots in pale silver, making them look almost alive. I bent down to touch one. Rough, wet, twisting under my fingertips, like it remembered me. Another whisper, closer this time, a soft thread of sound winding around my thoughts. I thought I saw movement, just beyond the bend of a tree, a shadow that was darker than shadow itself, shifting slowly, always at the edge. I want to call out, but my voice stuck in my throat. The clearing seemed to lean inward, watching, breathing. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and hollow in my ears. Footsteps, soft, brushing the leaf litter behind me. I dared not turn. The fog trembled at the edges of the clearing, curling tighter, folding into itself. There was a smell faint, like wet stone and decay. It made my stomach tighten. The whispering voices twisted in patterns I almost understood. Almost. A bird cried somewhere beyond the tree lean. Or maybe it wasn't a bird. The sound lingered too long, stretching thin and cold. I pressed my palms to the ground, feeling the soft, wet soil seep through my fingers. The roots groaned under the weight of something unseen. The clearing seemed smaller now. The moonlight faded behind a shifting veil of fog. Shadows moved in concentric rings, reaching, stretching. Every instinct I had told me to run. But my legs refused. A soft scuff, then silence. I held my breath. The whispering stopped, but the fog remained curling, restless. Something had been near me, or had always been. I knelt in the wet earth, trembling. The moon peeked through the mist, touching the hollow in the center. I could feel the cold seep into my bones. And then nothing. The clearing lay still, pale, waiting. The roots, the shadows, the whispers, they lingered just beyond the fog, watching me. I left the hollow quietly, my feet barely disturbing the soil. Behind me, the fog rolled and shifted, as if closing a door I had never opened. The moonlight followed for a moment, then faded entirely. I didn't look back, but I knew it would be there when I did. The path was quiet. Leaves pressed against my ankles, damp and brittle. Fog clung to the ground, pale and slow, like it was moving on its own. I could see the trees trembling slightly, though there was no wind. The tower appeared first as a dark shape, leaning broken, its top crushed into branches. I stopped, breath shallow. The smell of wet would thicken the air. Something in the ruin shifted, and the shadow moved too, crawling along the ground, stretching past the leaning walls. A low hum began, almost beneath my feet. I thought it might be the earth, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. It carried, soft and persistent, like a pulse I couldn't see. I crouched to touch the roots near the base of the tower. The hum shivered into my fingers, cold and alive, though it groaned behind me. I told myself it was a wind, but the air was still. A branch fell, breaking the silence, and I realized a shadow had twisted, curling inside the rubble. I moved closer. The ground was littered with shards of splintered boards, rusty nails glinting in the fog. Every step made the hum thrum deeper, as though the tower itself remembered the weight it once held, and it was breathing through the debris. A pale light caught the edge of a beam. I blinked. It flickered like someone breathing behind it. The shadow lingered there, stretching with a trembling light, but when I shifted my gaze, it was gone. The smell of damp earth grew stronger, mixed with something sweeter, rotting, almost like old resin. I pressed my hand to a fallen plank. The surface was cold, almost wet, and tiny vibrations ran up my arm. The hum became a whisper then, curling around my ears. I couldn't understand the words, but it felt like it was calling my name. Soft footsteps pressed into the leaves behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing, yet the feeling of being watched stayed, as though the leaning tower itself had eyes, dark and unblinking, just beyond the mist. I climbed over the debris, careful not to trip on nails or jagged wood. The tower leaned further, the angle impossible, yet it seemed alive, as though each broken beam might straighten at a thought. The shadow flickered again, but now it moved against gravity, sliding across the top of the debris in silent, impossible ways. I paused to breathe. The hum grew warmer, almost soothing, and I thought I felt the vibration in my chest, matching my heartbeat. But then the floor beneath me shifted. Tiny splinters breaking under weight I couldn't see. A cold brush against my arm made me flinch. I could not see what touched me. A soft rustle, like fabric across stone, passed behind me. I didn't turn. I felt in the air, a presence pressing against the fog, leaning close enough that the cold seemed to seep into my skin. The tower's shadow stretched longer. I watched the broken beam sway slowly, casting shapes across the misty clearing. It looked almost human, arms reaching out, then collapsed back into a heap of wood. I realized I hadn't heard my own footsteps for a while. Only the hum, only the whisper, the faint brush of air moving through splintered wood. I wanted to step back, but something kept me rooted, the vibration in my chest stronger, like it was drawing me in. The smell of resin grew heavier, almost sweet, almost familiar. I could hear breathing, soft, uneven, yet there was no one there. The shadow flickered one last time, sharp and thin, then disappeared into the fog, leaving only the leaning tower and the hum that trembled beneath my feet. I turned slowly, leaving the base of the ruin. The fog swallowed the path behind me, and the tower seemed to bend just a little more, as if it had always been waiting. The hum lingered. A whisper curled in my mind, soft and patient, and I realized it would follow me, long after the trees had swallowed the shadow again. The creek was frozen. A thin layer of ice stretched across it, brittle and pale under the dim, gray light. Fog curled over the surface, hiding the edges, hiding whatever waited beneath. I walked slowly along the bank, boots crunching against frost-hardened leaves. The air was damp, clinging to my skin, cold enough to make my breath shiver. Every step left a faint echo, swallowed quickly by the silence of the forest. Beneath the ice, shapes drifted, not solid, not quite liquid. They moved with a slow, unnatural rhythm, as if something deep below was breathing. I could not look away, yet my body refused to lean closer. A faint hum floated through the fog, soft, almost like someone murmuring from far away. It wound around the trees and through the frozen underbrush. I tilted my head, listening. It was not wind, not water. A voice whispered fragments of words that teased the edge of my understanding. Something calling, something remembering. The fog thickened. It clung to my cheeks, chilled the back of my neck. The ice rippled, though no wind stirred it. Pale shapes slid slowly beneath the surface, brushing one another, shifting. The reflections above did not match their movements. A shadow passed through the fog, long and deliberate, bending around the trunks of trees. I stepped closer, the crackle of frost under my boots louder now. A smell rose from the stream. Old earth, wet wood, something metallic, sharp. It made my stomach tighten. I wanted to turn, but something kept me rooted. Curiosity, fear, something older than either. The whispers grew. I could not make sense of the words, though my mind insisted they were familiar. A name, or many names, blending together. They circled me, coming from the trees, the ice, the fog itself. Each echo warmer, closer, yet impossibly distant. I knelt at the edge of the creek. The ice vibrated under my fingertips, subtle, like the pulse of something alive. I tried to see through it. Pale shapes drifted endlessly beneath, twisting, fading, returning. I felt eyes on me, not just behind the ice. Around me, within me, a thin crack sounded. The ice split in a line, too slow to be sudden. A cold breeze seeped from it, carrying whispers sharper, almost urgent. I heard laughter, soft, brittle, like breaking glass, or sobbing. I could not tell. The fog parted just enough for pale light to catch on a shape. It was human, I thought, or something human once. Still, it shimmered, translucent, waiting. It moved beneath the ice, reaching up with hands that blurred against the frozen surface. I wanted to scream, but my lips would not obey. I wanted to run, but my feet were roots, tangled and unyielding. The whispers became a chant, low and steady, threading through the trees, the ice, my chest. I felt a pull, not strong, but insistent, almost tender. It called me to kneel, to touch, to see. I hesitated, aware that some line had already shifted, somewhere between reality and that fog-soaked illusion. For a moment, the forest paused. Even the fog held its breath. The ripples beneath the ice stilled. The shapes beneath froze mid-motion, Shadows caught in a moment too long. Silence filled the spaces between the whispers. A cold, waiting silence that pressed into my ears and my ribs. Then it passed. The ice returned to its brittle calm. The shapes beneath drifted again, slower now, fading as if they had remembered nothing. The voices softened, trailing off into the distance, into the mist. I exhaled without knowing I had been holding my breath. I stepped back from the creek. The frost cracked beneath my boots as I moved, each step final, reluctant. The fog thinned just enough to let the pale shapes vanish completely. Only the hum remained, faint, like a memory brushing against my skin. I did not look back. The trees seemed taller, the silence heavier. Even the wind felt different, closer, listening. I walked away from the frozen stream, the whispers fading into the fog, but I carried them with me, soft, persistent, as if they were part of my own pulse now. And sometimes at night, when the air is still and the world is thin, I hear the hum again, beneath my floorboards, in the fog at my window, beneath the ice, always waiting. The forest smelled damp. Fallen leaves pressed underfoot, slick and dark. A thin fog curled between the trees, pale as breath. I found the cabin just past a bend. Small, squat, would blacken with age. A padlock gleamed faintly in the muted light. Humming drifted through the cracks around the door. Soft, persistent, almost welcoming. It wasn't a tune I knew, though it lingered in my chest. I pressed my palm to the wood. Cold, rough, a pulse under the grain. The humming shifted, quicker, like air moving through a throat. The windows were dark. Shadows pulled inside, still yet moving. I couldn't tell if they were one shape or many. Silence pressed thick against me. Every breath sounded loud. Every rustle of leaf or twig echoed. I circled the cabin slowly. The hum followed, faint and intimate. It threaded through the cracks, curling around my ankles. The padlock rattled softly. I imagined a key turning inside it. No one was there. The air grew colder. Something shifted in the corner of a window. Just a shadow, a sliver. It recoiled when I looked directly, then returned when I blinked. I pressed my ear to the door. The humming filled the space behind my skull. It was layered. Breath, sigh, the soft scrape of nails. Or maybe it was mine echoing back. I wanted to leave, but my feet rooted themselves in the cold dirt. The fog curled closer, clutching at my calves. A faint smell rose from the cabin. Wood smoke and something damp, like soil turned over. It reminded me of old cellars, long forgotten. Something that had waited. I traced a finger along the window frame. Rough splinters tore my skin. I felt the pulse again, beneath wood, behind shadow. Almost alive. The humming changed pitch. Lower, deeper. It filled the fog, wrapping around the trees. I couldn't breathe without it following. I leaned closer to the glass. Condensation smudged the inside. Shapes pressed against it. Impossible angles too tall, too thin. They didn't move like people. They were patient. I wanted to knock, to see if the sound would wake something. My hand hovered, then fell away. The fog sighed around me. Saw footsteps, or maybe the wind, moved behind the cabin. The shadows didn't respond. They waited, watching. The padlock rattled again. A shiver ran down my spine. I imagined the door swinging open on its own. A dark figure stepping into the fog. Breathless, silent. I pressed my cheek to the cold wood. The humming vibrated through my bones. It whispered promises I didn't understand. I thought I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and shallow. The sun dipped behind the trees. Fog thickened. Shadows pooled like water beneath the windows. I felt them watching me. Curious, patient. I stepped back. Leaves crunched softly underfoot. The humming softened. The air held its breath. I turned to leave, but the cabin stayed in my vision. Padlocked. Silent now, yet heavy with waiting. The shadow in the window lingered. Just a sliver, a promise. I didn't look back. My steps carried me through the fog. Cold pressed against my spine. Silence clung to the trees, swallowing the path behind me. And yet, as I walked, I could still hear it. Soft, distant humming. A breath, a presence, always just behind the fog. The fog lay heavy between the trees. Each trunk, black and gnarled, reached toward me like fingers. The ground was soft with fallen leaves, damp, cold against my shoes. Shadows flickered where the mist thickened. I thought it might be the wind, but the shapes lingered, watching. A low hum pressed into the air. It wasn't music, not quite, more like a slow, steady breath. I stopped walking. The hum didn't pause. It circled me, rolling across the grove. The bark was slick beneath my fingers. I touched the tree. It shivered, not with wind. Something beneath the surface stirred. Leaves rustled behind me, soft and deliberate. I turned. Nothing moved. The fog swallowed everything beyond my arms. A pale light filtered through the mist. It was faint, not the moon, not a star. The light pulsed briefly, as if the grove itself was breathing. I took another step. The humming changed. Softer now, but closer. It tickled my ears, almost intimate. I felt my chest tighten. Branches scraped together. A rhythm, slow, almost like footsteps. But no one was there. The mist curled around my ankles. Each movement left ripples across the gray. Something brushed against my sleeve. I froze. Only cold, wet leaves. But the memory of touch lingered. The shadows between the trees moved again. Faster this time. They didn't step on the ground. They hovered. I thought of turning back. But my legs refused. It wasn't fear. It was curiosity. Or something older, deeper. The hum grew louder. A vibration under my feet. It tickled my bones. Soft, constant, insistent. A smell drifted. Earth, damp and sweet. And something metallic. The grove breathed it toward me. I brushed past a tree. Its bark was cold, wet, alive somehow. A shadow leaned close, too thin to be human. Its eyes were just hollows, empty yet watching. I whispered my own name. The grove answered with a hiss, like the exhale of some enormous creature. Fog swirled around my head. I couldn't see my hands, couldn't see the ground, couldn't see the shapes that hovered just out of focus. A branch snapped behind me. I jumped, but it was nothing, or perhaps everything. The hum faded. The shadows paused. For a heartbeat, the grove held its breath. And then the mist thickened, covering the twisted trunks, the hollow-eyed shadows, the pale, pulsing light. I walked forward, each step slower than the last. The grove receded behind me, but the memory of it stayed. Soft footsteps in my mind, a breath in the mist, a shadow waiting, always waiting. The fog clings to my ankles. Each step sinks into damp earth, soft and unyielding. Branches lean, heavy with wet, brushing against my shoulders. A pale light flickers far ahead, or maybe it's only the mist folding it on itself. I feel it watching, patient, hovering. The voice begins again. A hum, low, almost a sigh, threading through the trees. It follows, but never touches. I pause. The air tastes like wet bark and cold iron. A shadow stirs where the fog is thickest. I swallow hard. The voice doesn't speak. It waits. My hands trail along the rough bark of a fallen pine. Soft needles press into my palms. The hum grows, resonant with the hollow of the woods. I wonder if leaving was ever possible. A rustling. Leaves whisper secrets I cannot understand. I stop, barely breathing. The forest folds around me, dense, unbroken, patient. Footsteps echo behind me. Or maybe only my own. The fog twists into shapes, figures, faces pale and shifting. They linger at the edge of sight. The voice hums again. It is neither cruel nor kind. It is simply there, a pulse through the mist, through the cold, through the wet earth. I lift a hand. The fog drapes over it like water. Something touches my wrist, soft, fleeting, a whisper against my skin, almost like a breath. I walk, slowly, each step a surrender. The forest does not hurry me. I do not hurry myself. The path bends, mud sucking at my boots. Shapes in the distance shift with the fog. I can't tell if they move toward me or if I move toward them. The hum follows, patient, waiting. A rotten log breaks underfoot. I pause. The smell of wet decay curls into my nose, sharp, familiar. I imagine the voice threading through it, winding into the hollow spaces. Branches scrape the sky. Pale streaks of light above. The hum swells and falls. A tide in the silence. I feel the forest patience. A quiet insistence. It has known me longer than I have known myself. I step into a clearing. Mist swirls at my feet. Shadows reach from the corners, thin and whispering. The hum is close now, under my ribs, inside my ears. I do not run. I cannot. The fog presses closer, shaping around me, folding me in. I am alone and not alone, all at once. The voice softens. It does not demand. It does not promise. It simply waits. I sit on a mossy stone. The damp presses through my clothes. Breath hangs in the fog like a thin veil. Shapes drift at the edge of vision, slow and unthreatening. And for the first time, I do not struggle. The forest does not release. It has no need to. I am part of the hum now, patient, waiting, quiet. The mist curls around my legs, climbing higher. A shadow brushes my cheek. Soft as a sigh, the voice lingers, hollow and steady, like the pulse of the woods themselves. I close my eyes and listen. The fog swallows everything. Footsteps fade. Shapes dissolve. The hum remains. I am alone, and yet never alone.